Good afternoon to you. Mark Side of HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion. It's Monday, the 21st day of June 2021, and boy, do we have a lot to talk about. It's kind of hard to believe. Had to check the calendar and see, is it still June? And yes, in fact, it is. We're going into the last third of June here, but as the background graphic suggests, maybe we're going to have a busy end to the month and a harbinger of things to come. Indeed, there's a lot to discuss, so let's get on with it, shall we? First, a real quick peek at climatology. As we get through this last part of June, this particular data set only goes back to, well, it starts from 2015, so it's a little bit aged, but it goes back a little over 170 years to 1851, and there's been only one instance of early season development down in the main development region, this special area out here between Africa and the Lesser Antilles. A lot of attention gets paid to this area, and for good reason. You can get some major long track hurricanes coming out of there, but you can also get some nasty ones that form much closer to land areas, and we certainly saw that last year, and even in mega seasons like 2005. Nevertheless, the main development region out here, a source of some very powerful long-lived hurricanes, and going back over 170 years, only been one area out here during this particular third, the last third of the month, that we have seen something develop that far east and it tracked on into the Caribbean from there. Elsewhere, usually we see the Gulf and maybe the Western Caribbean, a few random developments here off of the southeast United States, and then a big concentration here in the eastern Pacific. That's where you would expect a majority of the development here in the Western Hemisphere. So that's where we've been historically. Well, where are we going? Well, let's take a look at this. This is the tropical weather outlook from this afternoon. We have Claudette from the 11 a.m. advisory sitting off the Virginia Capes, south of the Delmarva region, and the mid-Atlantic states, 40-mile-per-hour wind moving on out 28 miles per hour to the north and east. And this will just clear the pattern and not be a problem at all. Maybe some lingering rip current issues, which definitely need to be taken seriously, but at least this is moving away. Now we got this feature down here in the deep tropics, and look, it's kind of down there, similar to where this system was. I don't know what that was. It doesn't let you mouse over these. Now that'd be a pretty cool feature if you could click on these dots, if it was like an interactive map. Maybe that's something we can come up with. Are you listening, Will Woodgate? As if he needs more projects. He's done a lot of stuff for us. Nevertheless, before I get too many crazy ideas, it is interesting that you do have that feature down there, and we look at the tropical weather outlook for today. Not quite as far south and east. The one that we were looking at there on the old map is a little bit farther south and east, but nevertheless, there's this feature. 30% chance of formation over the next few days. It will eventually run into more hostile conditions over here, but it could bring some showers and thunderstorms, gusty winds to Barbados, parts of the windwards and leewards up here, and maybe, just maybe, we'll put a big question mark over here in the Caribbean. This ends up being the seedling for something that develops in the Caribbean that some of the modeling is starting to pick up on, especially the GFS, down the road a piece. It's still more than a week out, but yeah, we'll see what happens. The seedling is there. You know, the player is on the field, so to speak. It's not just phantom developing something out of nothing. So we'll see how that pans out. All right, so animation here, satellite animation, courtesy of Tropical Tidbits. There is the tropical wave in the open Atlantic. There is Claudette, not very convectively active, not a lot of deep thunderstorms with it, which you would expect. The water temperatures up this way and the upper ocean heat content are not very impressive, so this will be very limited in its development and redevelopment, as it were, as this moves on out into the North Atlantic, eventually into the waters off of Atlantic Canada. Check this out, inland areas, some severe weather, even a tornado warning just a little while ago. Way up there in Maine, I noticed that, speaking of lower 48 weather briefly. Now, what is this deal right there in the Gulf of Mexico? You look at that, you might think, oh, for heaven's sake, please, nothing else for Louisiana and vicinity. Well, as long as you're not offshore there, I bet the oil interests out there on those platforms are getting quite a show, probably some lightning in there as well. But as I'll show you in just a moment, the looks can be deceiving. You look at this and you go, oh goodness, what's that all about? And I'll show you in just a moment that there's really not much to it. Meanwhile, strong upper level winds cutting out of the Caribbean here, through the Caribbean anyway, out of the eastern Pacific. Water temperatures have warmed up down here just a little bit above the long-term average, and so there's a little bit more upward motion and a little bit more wind shear perhaps because of that. Now look at that. That's a healthy tropical wave coming off of Africa, and that's starting to show up some in the ensemble prediction system, the EPS there from the Euro. We'll take a look at that towards the end of today's discussion. Real quick, here's Claudette. Even on the visible satellite animation, you can clearly see it's just mostly bubbles or little pockets of convection or thunderstorm activity, because there's just not a lot of upper ocean heat content for this to work with. There's not a lot of energy there, and so you wouldn't expect it to be very formidable at this time, and it's not. But it'll continue to move on out into the open Atlantic, making its way up towards the offshore waters of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So any sword fleet, I don't know when the sword fishing season is, but you get the idea. Any vessels out there, they don't need me to tell them to watch out, but you know, maybe so. Maybe they're distracted by other things and they forgot that Claudette is there, because it is, and so be aware of that. All right, so over the Gulf, kind of got a surface trough through here, just an area where the wind is converging in, and you can see that the wind is flowing right up in here, coming towards this line. It's just a little bit of a lower pressure area through here, and that allows the air to come together. And when it comes together at the surface, converges, it goes up. It can't go down because there's water there, duh. And so the air goes up and it spreads out, and you get these showers and thunderstorms. A big problem for mariners that are out there, and like the oil interest that I mentioned before, certainly with lightning strikes and gusty winds, but nothing tropical expected to come out of this, and we can tell because of our good friend, the Vorticity chart. Look at this. There's the Gulf, and there's just a little reflection of vorticity or spin in the atmosphere. Very, very little, so there's just not a lot there. It's more bark than bite. Now, if it persists and is able to fester and hang around, and we start to see more vorticity down there, more air coming in and kind of hanging around, and you know, counterclockwise rotation, yeah, we'll be a little bit more concerned. But right now, it looks like more of a surface trough down there than anything else. There's the vorticity signature of Claudette off the mid-Atlantic states. That's our tropical wave that's mentioned in the tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center out in the deep tropics. And then here's some energy, again, coming off the coast of Africa that we will have to watch. But this feature right here, we definitely want to keep an eye on as it tracks, again, towards the islands here and then makes its way into the Caribbean. And I will be very curious to see what it looks like when it gets over here several days down the road, as this energy kind of piles in and we get a more developed area of favorability in this area. Perhaps the GFS is certainly seeing that at about days 7, 8, and 9. That's too far out for me to be comfortable talking about it other than just a mention. You know, it's on my radar, so to speak. It's like, I see you. I see what you're up to. GFS, and that's all. That's good. That's fine. That's what it's for. You see headlines out there, and I'm sure there's YouTube videos and whatever else with all kinds of sensational headlines about what it shows farther out in time. But we're not going to talk about that, because who cares? It's so far out in time, nothing may happen at all. But we are aware it's there. The long-term GFS, the long-range GFS, and long-term does show something interesting. And so, yeah, you bet, it's hurricane season. It's June. Of course we'll keep an eye on it. And that's all we need to do. All right? All right, so looking at sea surface temperature anomaly is a good thing to do at least once per week. This is the NOAA Coral Reef Watch, you know, because warmer waters and the bleaching, I guess. That's why they call it this. It used to be the NOAA NESDIS chart. Anyway, it's the 5-kilometer resolution sea surface temperature anomalies. Version 3.1, updated yesterday. It's always a day behind. Well, what do we got? What do we notice? Well, here's some warming, fairly distinct, in the eastern equatorial Pacific, and then still kind of neutral out here in the Nino 3.4 area. basically your INSO regions are divided up into different regions, kind of like a Venn diagram. And this area out here in the Central Pacific is typically what affects this part of the Atlantic hurricane season. If you got a lot of warmth here, you get a lot more upward motion and a big rising branch of air here, sinking branch over here, and you shut down the season. Well, that's not happening right now, and it's probably not going to happen because instead over here and down here off of Africa in the Gulf of Guinea, that's where all the warm water is. I mean, well, not all of it, but a good deal of it. And, you know, it's certainly not cold. The main development region here warmer than average, and it just is an interesting coincidence that this is where our area of interest is. Boy, look at the Northwest Atlantic, really warm compared to the long-term average. Kind of got stirred up down here because of Claudette and what Claudette was before it was Claudette. All that disturbed weather down there. It's really easy to sort of dishevel the Gulf of Mexico. So let's move along and look at actual sea surface temperatures. I just got to slow down, then I can speak better. So Claudette moved offshore. It's kind of riding along that north part of the Gulf Stream. But north of there, any farther north, and it's lights out. I mean, literally, because the convection will just die out. And once it approaches Nova Scotia up here, if it gets close enough, sea surface temperatures really drop off, and it'll become more extratropical, losing that warm core, all that latent heat not available because of the cold water. And so it'll start to die off and just become more extratropical in nature. Meanwhile, in the Gulf of Mexico, again, kind of the agitation going on from Claudette and pre-Claudette stirred up the eastern Gulf. Remember, Claudette was an east-sided system. All that energy over here on the east side coming in was responsible for stirring all this up. The west side, you had offshore flow for one thing, and it wasn't very strong. I mean, hardly noticeable at all, I bet. And so as a result, water temperatures all through here, 29 and even 30 degrees Celsius. Corpus Christi down towards Matagorda and Boca Chica. Elon Musk, I don't know if he swims, but if he does and he goes into the islands there, Padre Island near Boca Chica, it's toasty. Yes, very toasty down there. Galveston Bay, Florida Bay down here, you know, nice and warm because you got that shallow coastal shelf. And so, yeah, you would expect very warm water temperatures. And the Gulf is always warm enough for development. Always. In the hurricane season. It's never not going to be warm enough, at least while we're alive. But what's important here, I've seen a lot of talk and a lot of people kind of talking around the knitting circle, as it were, about how cold the MDR is compared to some other year and blah, blah, blah about the MDR. I mean, it's like, come on now. You know, it's not like it's frigid out there. And what really matters is the upper ocean heat content. Yeah, because you could have the skin of the ocean, maybe the top 10 feet, 95 degrees, uniform all across the deep tropics. A sultry, ridiculous 95 degrees. If underneath that, it's 75 and 70 degrees down at 100 meters or so, the first time you get a tropical storm out there, you're going to mix and upwell that water, and it's game over. It's that deep ocean water and how warm it is at depth that really matters. And that's the chart that I like to show here because it shows up very nicely. This is from the AOML, the Atlantic Oceanographic Meteorological Laboratory, down part of NOAA and the Hurricane Research Division on Virginia Key. I've been there a few times myself. And so what does it show? Well, the physics of it I'm not going to get into, but basically just look at this line that I'm drawing, and we will outline the areas of at least some measurable upper ocean heat content. And again, to get into the actual joules per square centimeter and all that stuff, how much energy that represents, forget about it. I'm not even going to try to go there. Just look at this as that ocean water is plenty warm for strong hurricanes. Period. No doubt about it. We have seen Category 3 hurricanes, there's Bermuda, that have spawned up in this area when you had no upper ocean heat content to speak of. It didn't show up on the graph over here, and neither does my telestration if it's the same color. You understand? And so that's later in the season, of course, but all you got to have is just a little bit of upper ocean heat content and a favorable atmosphere, and bingo, you can get yourself a strong hurricane, all right? And so all this talk about, well, the MDR is cooled and the CDAS shows this and that. I'm glad people are watching. I am. But a lot has been made of that on some different message boards. And, there's been good debate about it. Nobody being stupid about it, so to speak, to be very blunt. But a lot more emphasis, I think, has been placed on the supposed cooler MDR compared to last year or some other year. And I don't think it really matters in the long term. And I'm going to show you some evidence to that effect in just a moment. You just got to have enough upper ocean heat content to get things going, and then the atmosphere can take care of the rest. It's about moisture in the mid-levels. If you have a dry mid-level of the atmosphere, forget it. I don't care if the ocean's 100 degrees. If you have a dry mid-level, it isn't happening. If you have warm air above everything and you don't have enough instability, it's not happening. All right? If you don't have strong African easterly waves or other impulses, it's not happening. So the one big ingredient is mostly in place from about 50 degrees latitude over, kind of stair-stepping here, all the way over to the southern and southeastern U.S. and everywhere points in between. Period. It is. So, yes, you may have things struggle out here, but that means they get farther to the west before they blossom, and guess who lives there? And there. And there. People. So, yeah, just the MDR is going to be fine. Believe me. And here's the proof. This is, well, at least some evidence. Not quite proof, but we're getting there. This is a really, really neat graphic. I love it. It's from the weathernerds.org site, weathernerds.org. And it is the ECMWF Ensemble Prediction System showing the different tracks of the cyclones within the Ensemble Prediction Scheme or system. 51 members of the ECMWF model family. Instead of just one operational model, you ask, so to speak, all the rest of the ensemble groups, the members, well, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And you do that over and over, and you help to develop a consensus. It's just like polling one person versus 50 people or 100 people or whatever. It just helps. It's called a consensus, or you get an ensemble way of looking at things. Forecasters use this a lot. And it's the what if scenario. What if this changes just a little bit? What does that do to the outcome? So let's take a look. I'll put it in the motion. You see Claudette there coming off the east coast. But what I want you to pay attention to is that right there. This is several days out in time, 5-6 days, right off the coast of Africa. And it shows deep tropical development. Not strong. It's not some raging hurricane coming out of there. But yes, it shows a deep system coming off of Africa there over the Gulf of Guinea, practically. Tracking west, several of the members developing it into a depression or maybe even a storm, 50, 60 knots, some of those members. This is a wake-up call. This is I don't know what else you want to call it. This is an alert, a signal. This is somebody waving a flag. Hello, the main development region in late June is going to come to life, perhaps. And we already have, you see this one system, that's the system today that's got the 30% chance. And this is the next system that's yet to be outlooked by the Hurricane Center. It's a few days out. But that should really catch people's attention, and I think is the bigger story than any headlines about what may or may not happen over here just yet. Because if this gets going at the end of June into early July, we look back to years like 1996, Hurricane Bertha, 2008, also Hurricane Bertha. What is the odds of that, right? Early Cape Verde development in July is usually a harbinger of a long and active hurricane season ahead. So I will be watching this very, very closely. Let's see when it really gets started there. We'll back this up. That's a week out. So before that, that's 6 days out. So by day 5, that's not that far out in time. And look at all the ensemble members from the Euro that have that. And a few of them try to develop that as well. And this will end up, as I said, over into the Caribbean. And we'll see what happens. I got my eyes on it. We already talked about that. Speaking of talking about things each morning, If you so desire, you can start your day with me in a podcast. Much shorter and no video. This is an audio podcast. It's available on Apple, Google, Spotify. It's hosted by Anchor. And it's called Hurricane Season, the podcast. See, just like the graphic from our good buddy Tim says, Hurricane Season, the podcast. That's what you search for. Look for the logo, easily identifiable. And I produce, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Probably going to get longer than that once things get cooking. But it's a digest, a quick summary of what I'm looking at, sort of the day ahead. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about in my video discussion. And I do this, as you're watching right now, later in the day. So sign up, tune in, whatever. It's absolutely free. There's no ads or anything like that. And it is all supported through our crowdfunding effort on Patreon, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. If you want to have access to a bunch of inside info, live webcams, the interactive tracking map, the ability to chat with us. It's a great community. It really is, and it funds our operations. And that's Patreon, an app and a website. Really, really cool. It allows me to do blogging stuff. And it's kind of our own encapsulated social media world of people with like-minded interests who are in that have the ability to fund whatever their level of ability is each month. It's great. Crowdfunding, nothing like it. Also, the Twitter right there. Let me get my little marker out so it looks better. There it is. On Twitter, look at the birdie HurricaneTrack. That's the brand. Facebook, and of course YouTube, and like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And really, don't forget, I hear my kids' YouTube videos talking about this all the time. If you want to be notified when I upload something, you have to manually tell YouTube to do it. There's a little notification button. Hopefully they haven't changed this stuff too much. Try to make it easy on people. I know a lot of the multi-million subscriber channels that my kids watch talk about that often. But it's true. If you want to be notified, hit the notification button, and it'll send you a push notification or whatever when I post a video. And especially when we go live, because we still have a live feed that will always be available to the public at no cost when there's hurricane action going on and we're out in the field. You definitely want to know when that's happening. All right? All right. Well, that is it for me for today. Monday is usually lengthy because we go over a lot more. But hey, it's also getting busy, and maybe that question mark there, a busy end to June? It looks like it might be. Stay tuned. We'll find out together. Have a great rest of your Monday and the rest of your week ahead. I am Mark Sutter. Thanks for listening and watching and all that good stuff. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.